We appreciate you coming to our YouTube channel. Today's film analysis will discuss how an abandoned child and the watch company Rolex changed people's thoughts about time. We'll discuss this information in the context of the video we're going to watch today. If visiting the channel for the first time, remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Don't wait any longer. Let's get started right away. In 1905, Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis, who was Hans Wilsdorf's brother-in-law and had been left alone as a child, started the company that would become Rolex. Since then, the business has expanded all over the world and is now worth a lot of billions of dollars. Even though the company started in the UK, most of its operations are now in Switzerland. Alfred gave money to the project, even though Hans was the one who came up with the idea. It was so strange that they worked together because Hans was an orphan from Germany. He wasn't English or Swiss and didn't come from a family of watchmakers. Hans was born in the town of Kulmbach in 1881. Kulmbach is in the north of the state of Bavaria. He was the second of 3 children born into a wealthy middle-class family. He was the second child born and the middle child. He was in the middle of all the action. His great-grandparents were well off, and in Kulmbach, his parents ran a successful ironmongery business. His family had a lot of money when he was growing up. Because of this, Hans had a stress-free childhood. This thing helped Hans get ahead in life. But when he was only 12, both of his parents died suddenly and within a short amount of time of each other. Because of this, he went through a lot of mental and emotional pain. As soon as his aunt and uncle were legally responsible for the children, they put them in a boarding school in Coburg. Hans used wristwatches, even though he knew they weren't reliable when he started working in his field. Still, he saw these clocks had untapped potential and thought they could be made into beautiful, accurate, and long-lasting timepieces. In 1910, Rolex got the first Swiss chronometer certificate of precision. Hans should be given a lot of credit because he helped finish this project in meaningful ways. He would have to think outside the box if he wanted his watches to be accurate and last a long time, and if he wished for Rolex to be a name that people worldwide knew. Hans was not only good at making watches with the latest technology, but he also learned how to sell them. He knew how to get his work in front of as many people as possible in the most exciting way. Hans was good at both making watches with new technology and selling them. They gave this one-of-a-kind case to Mercedes Glitz to see what she would do with it. The outside of the box was made so that dust and water couldn't get in. So, when an oyster shell was created in 1926 that didn't let water in, it was a step in the right direction. Mercedes, a competitive swimmer from the UK, wore the first oyster when she tried to be the first woman to swim the English Channel. Mercedes also pushed for the first time to swim the English Channel. She wanted to be the first woman in history to do this. Even though she worked hard, the results differed from what she wanted. More than 15 hours had passed by the time she was found in the cold water between France and Great Britain and brought back to land. It was awful that trying to save her didn't work because of the bad weather, but the effort was for nothing. Mercedes had been underwater for more than 15 hours after the failed attempt to save her. On the other hand, her Rolex showed no sign of damage. The crew and pilots of the first plane to fly over Mount Everest wore Rolex watches. This happened in 1933. These watches showed how well the team could fly. Sir Edmund Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay were the first to reach Mount Everest 20 years later. They all wore watches made by Oyster Perpetual. The crew and pilots of the first plane to fly over Mount Everest, which happened in 1933, all wore Rolex watches. The staff and pilots of the first plane to fly over Mount Everest, which occurred in 1953, all wore Rolex watches. Rolex went to the bottom of the ocean, as if that wasn't impressive enough. What do the Pope, Che Guevara, and Fidel Castro have in joint with the 14th Dalai Lama, Warren Buffett, and James Bond? All of them love Rolex watches because of how well made they are. The news shocked everyone worldwide, and soon people who worked in fields with nothing in common wore Rolexes. Before Rolex became a symbol of wealth and success, it was mainly used as a tool, not as a fashion statement. It's important to remember that the first Rolex was made as a tool, not as a fashion statement. Placing this information about Rolex's history is very important. Rolex watches also cost a lot less than they do now. In 1957, a stainless steel Rolex Submariner date model cost $180. This is almost as much as a Rolex watch costs today, around $1,500. Between the 1970s and the 1980s, Swiss watchmakers went through what they called a quartz crisis. Seiko, a company in Japan, was the first to make quartz watches. Most people think that this is where this fashion trend began. Instead of a mechanical clock inside, these watches were powered by batteries to keep time accurate. When battery-powered sports watches came out, they almost immediately put the Swiss watch business out of business. These watches were more accurate than mechanical watches, and because technology had improved, they could be made for less money. Quartz watches replaced mechanical clocks overnight, and Swiss watchmakers were in danger of going out of business immediately. Quartz watches are usually more accurate than mechanical watches. Quartz clocks are much more accurate than the mechanical ones they replaced. When Swiss watch companies like Rolex started selling their products, they advertised them as aspirational items. They also signed sponsorship deals with big companies and sporting events, like tennis tournaments, to keep this popularity. After his wife Florence Crotty died in 1945, Hans Wilsdorf stopped making watches. Then, he gave the company to the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Florence Crotty had died the year before. After another 15 years, he died in Geneva, Switzerland, at 79. He lived to be 79 years old throughout his whole life. Even though quartz watches were becoming increasingly popular, these marketing strategies helped Rolex keep its market share. Because of this, the company's eyes started to look less like valuable tools and more like collectibles. The company's focus on new ideas, accuracy, and how their products can be used in real life is why the Rolex brand is so famous. Let your good name do the talking for you. This saying applies well to Rolex because the company's success depends on how well it takes care of its product's design, quality, and service. Rolex is an excellent example of the saying, "Let your reputation do the work for you." We hope you liked today's movie as much as we did. The fact that an orphan started Rolex is just one of many interesting facts about the company's history that viewers can add in the comments section below. Thanks for coming to watch.